Hey everybody, my name is Neil. I am an LSAT tutor with over 1,000 hours of experience teaching the test in both one-on-one settings and large classroom settings. I've worked for multiple national test prep companies and improved my own score from a 154 to an official 179. Currently, I'm a student at Harvard Law School and I work as an LSAT tutor. So if you're interested in working with me or joining my online community where I try to make the LSAT as accessible as I can, go ahead and check out the link in the description. So the reason I'm making this video today is to go through the top 6 most common pitfalls I see students making when they are studying for the LSAT. So if you're watching this video, it's very likely you're making at least one of these mistakes and it's preventing you from increasing your LSAT score and probably making you feel stuck where you're at, like you can improve on the test. So let's go ahead and jump into the first one here, which I want to call grinding. So grinding is when you keep doing questions over and over and over again, or keep doing timed sections over and over again, or even full-length practice tests over and over and over again, but you're not actually reviewing your mistakes. You're not actually changing your approach. You're not actually learning from doing the questions. And this is all too common for students studying for the test. They think that if they just keep on doing more volume, doing more questions, somehow, some way, their score is going to go up. But then week after week, they take a new practice test and their score is exactly the same, or sometimes it gets even worse, and they start freaking out because they've been studying for so long and they just can't seem to get their score up. Well, the reason you can't get your score up is because you're not actually changing anything in your approach. You're just grinding through the questions. So when you study for the LSAT, the most important thing you should be doing is reviewing your mistakes, slowing down, thinking about your approach to the question. Stop doing time sections, stop doing full tests, and just do one question at a time and think about how you can get it correct. Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what you're doing if you're just grinding through questions and not actually trying to change your approach. So what you should be doing is reviewing every single mistake you make as soon as you make that mistake. So if you get a question wrong, immediately review that question, and you should start a wrong answer journal where you answer 4 questions so that you can figure out the mistakes you made and how you can improve those mistakes. So the first 2 questions are actually going to be the first 2 mistakes you made. So the first mistake you made is you picked the wrong answer. So you're going to ask yourself, why did I pick the wrong answer? And the second mistake you made is you got rid of the right answer. So you're going to ask yourself, why did I get rid of the right answer? Then you're going to think about how you can fix those mistakes. So you're going to think about how you could fix the first mistake. You're going to think about what made the wrong answer wrong. So you're going to look at the words in the answer. You're going to look at the specific details. You're going to think about what's not supported, what's too strong. Then you're going to answer the fourth question, which is how you can fix the second mistake. What makes the right answer right? What makes that answer 100% supported by the text? What does the text say that makes that answer completely and 100% correct? If you do that for every single question you get wrong, as soon as you get it wrong, I promise you your accuracy will start to improve, and that's what's going to hopefully drive your score up over a long period of time. The second most common pitfall I see students making is rushing. So when we take the LSAT, we know it's a very fast-paced test. You only have 35 minutes per section, and when students start studying for the test, they feel like they have to do this stuff under pressure, or they're not going to be able to see any success on test day. So, 1, 2, 3 weeks into studying for the LSAT, they start doing their time sections, and they start rushing through the questions. They're thinking about, well, I can't finish the test in time, so how am I going to improve? What am I going to do? And this is a huge mistake. That's because you need to actually learn the test, understand the fundamentals before you start doing it in these time conditions and rushing through the questions. When you're doing the test in time conditions, you don't have to finish the entire thing, you just have to get the questions that you're doing right. Rushing through an entire test section is like trying to race in the Tour de France without even knowing how to ride a bike. You have to understand how to take the test by doing questions slowly, getting a process in place, and then slowly speeding up that process over time. So whenever you're doing the test, even if you're doing it under time conditions, never rush through a question. In fact, the slower you go, breaking down the question, trying to understand it, making sure you know what you're reading, the faster you'll actually be at the question counterintuitively. That's because you're going to spend less time debating between answers, less time going back and forth between the text and the answers, less time being confused and not knowing what to do and not having direction. And you're just going to be able to find the answer much more quickly and much more efficiently if you actually slow down and take the time to think through your process. The third most common pitfall I see students making on the LSAT is expecting linear progress. Every single week, your test score is not going to go up. That's not how this works. If you've ever tried to lose weight before, you know that it's not a linear process. Maybe one day you wake up, you're a couple pounds more than usual. Maybe another day you're a couple pounds less than usual. But over a long, sustained period of time, your average weight will go down if you are doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, which is eating in a calorie deficit. One day, you might wake up after 2 weeks of not seeing the scale move at all, down 5 pounds. And that's just how the process goes. Progress comes in waves, and it's the exact same thing on the LSAT. And that's because the LSAT is a time test with very particular conditions, so you can't see a lot of the progress you're making in those particular conditions, because a lot of the progress you're making is behind the scenes, where you're learning the process, you're trying to get the fundamentals, you're slowly trying to pick up how I can determine the answer between these two, or how I can predict an answer, or how I can understand this line. And you don't see a score increase until it all comes together. And that might take a longer time. And so you might not see your score change for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. You might see the same exact score. And then all of a sudden, boom, your score goes up 5 points after 2 months of practice. That's just how it works. The LSAT progress you want to see comes in waves. So don't get discouraged. Don't expect linear progress. Just keep doing what you're doing and focus on getting one more question right today than you did yesterday. Don't focus on the score. Don't focus on practice tests. In fact, for a long time at the beginning of your LSAT journey, you shouldn't really be taking practice tests. You should take one at the beginning of when you start studying as a diagnostic, and then study for a while, slow, untimed, and then after maybe a month, 2 months, take another practice test, see where you're at. But don't be taking practice tests every single week. It's only going to be discouraging because you're going to be expecting linear progress and you're probably not going to see it. So the fourth common mistake I see students making on the LSAT is just overcomplicating things. See, the LSAT's not like any other test you've taken before. It's not a knowledge-based test or an information test. So it's not going to help to just memorize a bunch of facts or regurgitate a bunch of rules that you read in some test prep book somewhere. The LSAT is a skills-based test. And so when you're studying for the LSAT, it's going to be testing you on common sense principles that you know about, just phrased in a very verbose, wordy, annoying, complex way. And it's your job to read that verbose, wordy, complex language and rephrase it in a way that makes sense to you. So you're not going to be able to do that by just memorizing a bunch of rules. The only way you're going to be able to do that is by practicing that skill over and over and over again, one question at a time, and reviewing your mistakes when you get that question wrong. Think about why the right answer is right, why the wrong answer is wrong. So don't overcomplicate things. Don't try to go out of your way to create the perfect study routine or the perfect plan or memorize a bunch of curriculum or regurgitate a bunch of information. Just work on one question at a time and think about why that question in front of you worked out the way that it did. The fifth common pitfall I see is students testing before they're ready. The practice tests that you have access to for the LSAT on LawHub are exactly the same as the real test you're going to take after you've signed up for the test. The format is the same, the question types are the same, you're going to be in the same room probably if you're taking it on the virtual format. If you're not taking it on the virtual format, you're still going to be using the same software. Everything is identical. And so when students say, well, I'm not really scoring where I want to score, but I'm just going to take the test to see how it goes. Well, that's not really a good plan, because you know how you're going to score on test day because you've been taking practice tests, let's say every week, and you know what your practice test scores are right now. So to assume that magically, for some reason, that on test day your score is going to shoot up 5 points and you're going to hit your goal score is just wishful thinking, and it's not realistic. So if you're not scoring where you want to be when you take the real test on your practice test, then you have no business taking a test. In fact, you should probably be scoring a little bit higher than you want to score on test day on your practice test, because you might have some nerves on test day that might drop your score a couple of points. Either way, you should at least be at your goal when you're taking practice tests, because when you take the real thing, you're very, very, very likely not going to do better. So don't test before you're ready. Push back your test deadline. Don't pick a deadline before you've started studying. You should start studying with a good buffer time, have a plan of when you're probably going to take it, but have also the idea in mind that that might change and that you might not be where you want to be by the time you hit that test date. So the sixth common pitfall I see when students are studying for the LSAT is having a hard deadline. Now, this is very similar to the pitfall of testing before you're ready, but the reason this is a different pitfall is because having a hard deadline is going to be detrimental to how you're actually studying for the test, and it's going to create a lot of unnecessary anxiety come test day. So let's talk about what I mean by that. Let's say you are studying for the LSAT. It's the summer before an application cycle, so it's June. And you are thinking of applying in September, right as applications open, so you really want to make sure you get your LSAT done on the September test date. So you say, that's my hard deadline. I need to take the September test, or I'm not going to get into law school, I'm not going to get my scholarships. I need to make sure I test on September. You give yourself 3 months. You think, oh, well, this should be easy. I'm going to start studying for the test. And then you start studying in June. Month goes by. Now it's July, and you haven't really seen your score go up very much. You haven't really seen a difference. Well, now you're going to start being a little anxious, freaking out a little. Well, my score hasn't really gone up. I have to test in September. I'm not getting the score I want. Well, let me just start doing a bunch of practice tests. Let me just see if I can keep doing practice tests, and I'm going to study more. I'm going to try to get my score up. Well, now we're in the grinding mindset we talked about earlier, where you're just doing a bunch of questions, not really reviewing them, not really learning, and your studying habits have shifted to a state of anxiety where you're not actually focusing on the task at hand, which is understanding the individual questions on the test. As you get closer and closer to your test date, your hard deadline is creating more and more anxiety, and your studying is getting less and less productive. That's the problem with setting a hard deadline. Then September comes around, you're taking the September test, and your anxiety is at an all-time high because you haven't been scoring where you want to score. And when you're taking this test, you're freaking out even more. You're not thinking about the test, you're just thinking about the score. And when you take the test, your score absolutely plummets. That's what happens when you have a hard deadline. So what we want to do is we want to expand our timeline and have flexibility in that deadline. Let's think about taking the test. Maybe we'll take it in September, but let's also sign up for October and November. And now we're going to have 6 months. So as we get closer to September, we're not scoring what we want to score, but that's fine because we have these backup options, right? As we get closer, we're still studying the right way. We're focusing on one question at a time. We're not really thinking about our pacing yet. As we get closer to September, maybe we think, oh, well, September I'm not ready for. Let me cancel that test date. Then in September, you start dialing in your pacing. You start seeing your score up and you're ready to take the October test, but you're not anxious about the October test because you have the November test as well. So you go into October more calm, more prepared, not super stressed out. And what happens there is you actually get the score you're looking for, and you can cancel the November test. So reducing the anxiety, expanding your timeline, being willing to take multiple tests. You can take up to 5 tests in 5 years, so don't worry about taking multiple tests, and don't have such a hard set deadline. Expand your timeline. Don't worry about using all your tests. That's going to help your studying. It's going to help your test anxiety. There you have it. Those are the 6 common pitfalls I see students make on the LSAT. If you're watching this, you're probably making one of those. Hope that was helpful, and good luck with your studying.